Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Brock Beard from lastcar.info coming at you after the conclusion of an absolutely wild, insane, and very, very controversial Cookout 400 at Richmond. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. We're going to jump right into it here, talking about the Cup Series race. We'll get into the Truck Series race as well. I have stuff for show and tell tonight. We got a packed show here, so we'll jump right into it. What the hell was that? What was going on there? Austin Dillon has punched his tickets into the playoffs here under unbelievable circumstances here, wrecking not only the person he needed to pass to get the lead in the first place in an overtime finish, but also hooking left and right rearing the person that was going to inherit the win when he got held up by spinning that person out. And even in the unofficial scoring, I saw Denny Hamlin was originally going to be listed as fifth in the running order. Looking at the NASCAR.com page, it's actually refreshed it, putting Hamlin in the second spot here. So I have no idea what's going on in terms of what the moment of caution was or the scoring or anything. So undoubtedly, this could very well change later on in the show here. But I think, there's so much to unpack here, and I guess that'll probably be just the focus of the show here on there is what is this, and is this a win that should stand? Is this a playoff spot that should be earned? Is this is this just rough driving? Is it just aggressive racing that we want to see, especially at a track like Richmond, where, as we were talking about from even our watch along last week on Friday, a track that hasn't traditionally had really close or crazy finishes or anything like that. And now having something, like this happen, what is and what is not acceptable. And I think that the unfortunate part that tips the scale on this discussion today is that we do have a playoff style, elimination style format to the playoffs that through each evolution of it has gradually ramped up the tension more and more over these years. And we've seen these drivers get more and more aggressive, even with different cars, whether it be the Gen 6 car or the next gen car or whatever else in between. It's a system. Landon Castle put it perfectly. Don't hate the player, hate the game. I agree. I think that puts it very succinctly. I think that there's a lot that's always been said about these younger drivers that don't seem to have a lot of respect for other competitors. We've seen this out of what was happening in the Truck Series Championship last year. But this is nothing new. This is nothing new in the playoff system in general. You think back to Ryan Newman nerfing Kyle Larson out of the way at Phoenix to get a transfer spot. You think to the Hail Melon with Ross Chastain. People are doing really desperate and crazy moves. And I think NASCAR, at least publicly on their PR side, loves that because they're going to just put this out there and be like, wow, look how aggressive these drivers are and how badly they want to win the championship and all this other crazy stuff. But there is such a thing as a Pyrrhic victory where you just burn everything in existence there. Yeah, you won championship, but you're just leaving desolation behind you here. And this is just the latest example of that. And I think that's the important thing to kind of look at this right here. If you look at, even again, the race that we watched on Friday there from 2000, it was late in that championship season and you had a full season title. And yeah, I mean, you tried different strategies. You tried to outwit your competitors. But if at the end of the day, you get maybe, a 14th place finish, and maybe you squeeze that out of maybe a 20th place car, that was still a good day. And at the end of the season, you can just look at these different moments during the year and say, oh, well, they beat us there. We should have been faster here. This is not the kind of racing that we have today. And this is nothing, again, it's nothing new. But it's more consequences of it, and the stakes get higher and higher. You got to factor in the charter system and people buying and selling charters. And in the case of Richard Childress Racing in particular, a team that really struggles, and maybe something, strategy wise works out for them where, they're trying these different tire compounds or, finally hitting on a combination for the first time this entire year where both teams, both Kyle Busch and Dillon, have been out to lunch. Bush had the injury at Indianapolis, said he couldn't even have started a race if we had a race during the Olympic break. They were in desperate situations. And in the past, teams that are in desperate situations, maybe they'll try to get the best run they can, but they wouldn't be out there just wrecking somebody going for the lead. But I also know at the same time that a Cup Series race now, as then, is not something that's very easy to accomplish. It isn't. And I know Austin Dillon himself gets a lot of criticism for so-called Mickey Mouse wins in his career, some more so than others, whether it's fuel mileage or just some big pile up because of a rainstorm that NASCAR didn't see. In this one here, before even the wreck that forced this into overtime, he was having a very impressive run out there, and it would have been nice to have him just win it just point blank. And, I think it would have been much harder for people to be so critical of him. But unfortunately, the way this played out with an overtime finish, and we always know how crazy stuff gets in overtime here, it led to, unfortunately, another outcome that's entirely too common in the playoff era. And let's be real here, too. When this race restarted and you had Joey Logano and Austin Dillon up front, two of the most aggressive to overly aggressive to borderline dirty drivers, I would even say, in this series, at least for their traditional part of it. Emp Lemon made a pretty good case for Logano's own career to this point, but Dillon certainly at the same time, whether it was wrecking Eric Almirola on the backstretch to win the Daytona 500, again, there's a streak of runs here, and I think it was a bit longer for Logano than Dillon in this case, just because Dillon hasn't been in contention for this many wins, at least not in the Cup Series. But it's just unfortunate. It looked like he was going to be building to something pretty ugly there. And indeed, that's what it turned out to be. I thought for sure Denny Hamlin was going to be able to squeak right through and get the win. And indeed, he would have under ordinary circumstances there. That second move and hooking the left rear of Hamlin's car there to put him in the wall there, I think that is probably more, that steps this up a notch a bit in terms of something really egregious beyond just simply dumping the guy in turn 3 and not slowing for the corner and taking the guy out. We've seen a lot of, that example when somebody just gets really close. You think of 2003 at Darlington and how many times they beat and banged off each other there, but didn't fully wreck each other in that case. But wrecking a couple of drivers to get it, it's a desperate situation. There's no guarantee that team's going to be as good in these last couple of races with time ticking down, and you got Daytona that's unpredictable. You got Darlington. You got Michigan. Although I think Austin Dillon is quite good at Michigan, and probably if this didn't work out, he was probably going to be very good in that race too. It's just unfortunate. It's really unfortunate. So I know Dillon's is going to get a lot of the blame for this as well. He should, because ultimately he's the guy behind the wheel, and other drivers are trying to handle this playoff system in something a little bit closer to just straight up racing each other. But yeah, the format is absurd too. It lends itself to this. And I think, is it really that much better than a full season championship? That's actually one thing I was going to be working on during this Olympic break. I had a few more opinion video scripts together. Me doing opinion stuff, despite me popping off on these streams here, is actually quite difficult for me because I want to try to bring up specific examples and polish it and try to make it sound as smooth as possible. And that takes so much more work on my end here. But I had one in the works here on the full season championship. I think that's probably been the closest one to it, and really proposing, why it's so preferable to what we have here, and not just nostalgia, not just saying, oh, it's because of what was around before. But just really, even with the drivers we have and the point system we have with the 1 point per position, that it would probably work even better in the current format here. And yeah, if you have a driver that just cruises and gets away and dominates the season, well, then winning a race is still significant. And that's the other part of this here too. I was touching on that a moment ago here. Winning a Cup Series race is still massively important to these drivers. And I know that sounds really obvious, but it kind of isn't from the way that this sport is presented these days, because everything's the championship. Even when you win a race, it's second to, oh, you punched your ticket in the playoffs. I said it myself. I'm starting the show here tonight. Oh, it's like, you're going to be in the playoffs. You got these playoff points, and isn't that great? You have a chance for the championship, even though we know every time in any format, there's drivers that are eliminated from the championship in the early weeks of the playoffs, or in the first round in this case. Is that any better than somebody that gets off to a sluggish start in a full season championship and is completely eliminated from the title back then? What's the difference? So we have a situation here where I think the system should be looked at more critically. I don't think that's certainly, obviously, there's not going to be any changes this year. We got everything going on here, and probably not going to be any changes next year. But it's something that should be looked into, because I think that, we're as much as people griped about the good points day, about like getting just a good finish and being okay with it, you still had moments where somebody could, lead the most laps. And back when you get points for that, you didn't need to rely on stage points either. Everything is just so transactional in the sport now. And yeah, and you have that element of it. Kind of at the other end of it too, what I was kind of starting to say about winning a race and how it is just so important to these drivers, and they would do just about anything. Mike Skinner famously said back in 2000 that he would wreck his mother to win a race, because he went through his career for as long as he did and came very close to winning and just never quite could do it. Faced the same struggles driving at Richard Childress in a different era where he wasn't necessarily the flagship driver either, but really trying to kind of make a name for himself that way and not accomplishing it. But we didn't see him, in a situation where he got really close to a winner and he was trying to even wreck somebody out of the lead, especially back then when he just had concrete barriers, and trying to do something like that would actually result in potentially something really dangerous at the same time. That was another way to look at it back then. But I'm still reminded, the championship format, the way it's set up is it's presented as if it's, a championship is a bigger accomplishment, I'm sure, for a driver than winning a race. Drivers want to win races for sure, but they also want to win championships. Look at Denny Hamlin, for example. Drivers won so many races and, is just trying to just put it all together into a championship year. But how does one even do that when you just have these kind of X factors out there today, on top of the unpredictabilities of racing itself, like we saw with Martin Truex earlier in this event with his engine failure? That came out of nowhere. But the races still mean something. I constantly go back to what it was like in the media center at Phoenix last year when Ross Chastain won the race, but didn't win the championship because he wasn't in the championship 4. And everybody wanted him to say that he was just so disappointed because, he won a race, but if he just was if he was just in the championship 4 and he won that race, he would have the title. He would have that. It's like, no, he said, I won a cup race. Cup races are hard to come by. And Chastain himself is one that's very right to be pointing that out, because in his career, he's had so many rides slip out from under him. When he was trying to get the DC Solar deal together for Ganassi. At that same Phoenix track was when he announced it. I remember him walking out of there with a big smile on his face. And then, of course, the raid happened, and that deal fell through, and he had to kind of take a few steps back and get another run at it. And when he did, he made sure he made the most out of it. He may win a championship one day. He may not. But at the same time, the race wins are going to be what's going to be meaningful to him. I think that in a traditional full season championship format, you try to win the most races you can. You try to have the best season you can, and then the points take care of themselves. Whether it's, in this case, winning a lot of stages or getting a lot of stage points, or under the traditional old format where you get bonus points for leading a lap or leading the most laps, whatever the goal is within the race. But secondary to just, you just try to do the very best you can, and then let the points determine themselves. But today, there's all these other elements to it that make it, you got to have situational winning. You got to have a situation where, you need to win at this time. You need to win at this moment. And, there's situations where you can only make the championship if you win, or you can only make the next round if you win. Doing your best isn't really enough anymore. It's not fair. And we're creating a situation where, again, I empathize for a driver, especially like Hamlin, where he's been around here a long time. Not just saying this because I'm wearing the shirt, but like him, other drivers that have been around as long as him, like Logano, like others, the very few drivers that are left of that generation, Martin Truex, my goodness. So many of them are retiring these days that, really it's changed. But yeah, we've now brought in a whole generation of drivers where the only thing they understand is the chase, the playoffs, eliminations. And you can't race those the same as a full season championship. And I know that was part of the design, that we wanted to have dessert after every meal here, where every single season is going to end with a 4-wide championship battle where anybody can walk away from it. And everything else that happened that year is pretty much dusted aside, other than the steps that took you through the playoffs to actually make the elimination rounds, where a guy like Kyle Larson can win, 11 races and still have to go through those same steps and still almost not make it to that last round, and then have to beat the other 3 drivers to win the championship. Just make it so much harder, as if these drivers don't want it enough, as if it's not already challenging enough, as if winning a race isn't already so difficult. It's absurd. And moments like this really kind of bring this focus to us. They are spectacular. And this was a wild and absurd finish, just like the Hail Melon, just like the deal with Newman and Larson at Phoenix, just like any of these other examples here. But none of these things don't just happen for no reason. These things happen because the championship format rewards it. And because that's the way you have to perform in this. And if you don't do that, you're out. And the same money is at stake, if not more so, with how much expensive these cars are to build and maintain, to build them to such exacting specifications when you can't really innovate anything, when the teams only can cover like the hubs on the cars, because that's basically the only part where they can really seem to really make any particular modifications of their own, the only part of it that they're really going to be that particular about anymore. Yeah, it's an unfortunate situation. And the problem is you have two sides of it here. It's both wild and entertaining when you get something like this, as this undoubtedly was, but then you wonder, okay, at what cost here? I mean, what's really happening here? So it's, it's not great. It's not great. It's both the best thing and the worst thing at the same time, because undoubtedly, the sport's going to get a lot of clicks this week, and I'm sure the PR department is going to put out plenty of clips of that finish and show, look how wild it is. And, oh, it's the 3. It's just like Dale Earnhardt would do. He would rough somebody up. He rattled somebody's cage, and he went out there and he did that. And, it's like, well, look, I mean, I've seen, races at Richmond where he would move somebody out of the way, but he wouldn't wreck them. He just tried to just rattle them and get him out of the way, like the battle between him and Ricky Rudd back in 91. Or anything back then. I mean, you think of the Bristol night race in 99, in that one, even in that case there, he just spun out one driver. And even then it was pretty light contact too. It wasn't a complete, desperation move into the corner there. So, you have all these elements that are working together at the exact same time. And I may still make that video. I'm thinking about it. Because this is a perfect illustration of probably why that needs to be re-examined a bit. Because it's unfortunate, because what does it mean to win a championship? I would think traditionally, growing up, a lot of the drivers I pulled for never had a chance to win a championship. When I would watch a race back then, I wanted to see them win a race. It about meant as much to me as a fan, I would imagine, as it did to the drivers themselves to try to win a race. Winning a championship would be great. But when I was pulling for Jerry Nadeau and he was 20th in points for a full season championship, or Ricky Rudd when he was struggling in his owner-driver operation, or Derek Cope when he was trying to move from ride to ride, drivers of that caliber were just trying to, make ends meet for him. And, it's been great to see Ricky Rudd get into the Hall of Fame and be recognized for that endurance in his career. But nowadays, you got a lot of younger people that look at Rudd's career, for example, and it's like, oh, he only won 1 or 2 races a year, and it's like, well, in today's format, that would hardly do anything. I mean, he would need to win a lot more races to get through the playoffs, and just ascribing this modern element of the sport to the past as well. I mean, that's just kind of where we are. And it's unfortunate that it's become so common that, drivers have had to adapt to this and evolve in that direction. And if we did just change it back to a full season thing, it would be an adjustment the other way. And, the same strategies wouldn't work. You probably have different drivers that would be better at that format than others. Ones that are certainly capable of winning more races or being more consistent in their finishes. And certainly, having falling out of a race actually means something. I mean, Truex drops out of this race, and it's just viewed at, oh, he's got one less chance to win a race and win his way into the playoffs. Not, oh, this may actually take him out of the championship altogether because he's X number of points out of the lead. That's the part that needs to be looked at. It just makes everything matter more. And, I think sometimes you don't understand what you have until you lost it. I remember being excited about the chase when it first came in 2004, because it was like, okay, Matt Kenseth won one race and dominated the championship. And I didn't really understand why he was dominating it, because he never seemed to be that fast in any of the races. he would always finish like, it seemed like he finished between 5th and 8th every week, but that was what he needed to do. And when Ryan Newman is winning everything in sight on fuel mileage, but he's finishing last so often, he almost won the last car championship that year. Yeah, that's not going to be enough because you got to be consistent. You got to put together a year. A championship, more than anything else, should be a celebration of the season that preceded it and a celebration of the excellence that driver showed during that year that set them apart from everybody else. And, little moments like this will happen where you'll have a race where, yeah, maybe somebody crashes their way into the lead, but they're 31st in points, and maybe this is their one good moment they had out all year because they haven't been a factor the rest of the season. This has been the closest they've been able to sniff a win in the entire year, and that should be celebrated in its own moment, even if it was something, that's going to be that aggressive in that paradigm, not so much in this format now. But that's just kind of where the difference is. So, the sport needs to really realize this at some point. I don't think the answer is to add further restrictions, further regulations to it. It's like, okay, we're going to have aggressive driving penalties and we're going to have all that. I don't want to have more rules in this sport. We don't need something where everybody's like, oh, well, okay, this was bumping somebody out of the way to win, but this was wrecking somebody and you could have injured them, and so we're going to penalize you. And then what's the penalty going to be? We're going to take the win away. We're going to take points away. It's going to be money. It's going to be this, that. It's just arbitrary. It's more arbitrary stuff on top of something that's already arbitrary. There needs to be less. There needs to be just clear it out and just simplify it. Same problem we're having in qualifying. There was that great video that was posted. I didn't post it, but I think it was LA Productions or I'm sorry, I'm trying to remember it offhand here, but whoever put it together that was talking about the qualifying format and just how needlessly complicated it is, especially after Indianapolis, right on the money. It shouldn't be. It should be who's the fastest. Like, you win a pole, that means you were the fastest car. You don't have to have multiple rounds. You don't have to do it twice or 3 times. You don't have to have multiple minutes to be out there, maybe get 1 or 2, good laps, or like, okay, it's like, look, you get it done or you don't. And maybe you have somebody that's surprising that qualifies really well and they get a great pit stall. And maybe it's a driver that doesn't get featured that often, but they get to be a story the whole weekend. Rick Mast wouldn't have won the pole for the 94 Brickyard under the current format here. They would just keep doing qualifying over and over again until, one of the big names get up there and actually get the pole. And then what does that mean ultimately? It means you're best at manipulating that system. It's the same reason people always, have a problem looking at Jimmy Johnson's legacy in the sport these days. Jimmy Johnson figured out the chase system perfectly. Jimmy Johnson and Chad Knaus, should be recognized for how well they figured out that system, to the point where they would get a couple wins in the year. They usually wouldn't be very good in the spring. Then they would get a couple of wins. They'd look pretty steady. Then in August, their performance would drop off because they were trying some different setups or whatever. And then in September, they just snapped to it and they'd win 2 or 3 races and nobody else could catch them. And they would just do that over and over again. The 5 straight championships, is something else, but they figured out the system that was in place. It's so much harder to do that in a full season championship. That's why even Richard Petty didn't win a lot of those championships in a row. He won 7 championships, but not in 7 straight years. That's why when Cale Yarborough won 3 in a row, it was such a big deal. You talk about the brutal consistency you have to have, especially in those, manhandling those old cars around the track, where, a mechanical issue may drop you a few laps down, but you got to keep going out there. You don't have power steering or whatever the other situation is. It's different. And I think, I know that there's always going to be that separation where, people are going to be like, okay, well, look, you just don't like it because it's new. You don't like it because it's different. It's like, no, I don't like it because it's needlessly complicated. And it's restructured the sport into something that is no longer about racing. I was kind of thinking this the other night in talking about the Truck Series race. It's like, do a lot of people that are passionate about the sport even understand what racing is? Is racing just restarts? Is racing just crashes? No, it's not. It's fast cars on a track, trying to get to that distance before everybody else does. And it's like, it's catching up. It's trying to catch the next car in front of you, or get around these people in this amount of time, or run the fastest lap this many times. And it's all those little things that you have to do to get to that point. There's already so much stuff that's happening, even in a full season championship, where every race and every little moment matters, where it's just one slow pit stop can drop you just off the lead lap and you're just not going to be a factor again, or something like that. That's where it really needs to kind of return to it. That's where it needs to be. That's what racing is. Racing isn't just the moments that are exciting. It's not just, oh, it's a big crash or, oh, it's a restart. It's like, oh, we're just kind of sitting there waiting for a restart to happen. Racing it can be a long green flag run. It could be a race without a single caution or a restart. But you got a lot of strategy that's happening. We got a good the frustrating thing about this particular race is we did get a taste of that here because we got to see different strategies because of these two different tire compounds. And I'm glad NASCAR tried that. And I'm glad that they were hands off on it enough that these teams could actually try different things. Are they going to save them to stage 3? Or are they going to try them earlier to see how they perform in an earlier phase of the race, like we saw with Daniel Suarez? How many spots are they actually going to gain? How much drop-off are they going to get? That was the fantastic part of it. And that's always the thing that seems to happen in these situations. We had this at Indianapolis a couple weeks ago, where there's a lot of positive things that are happening, but the negatives are going to be the ones that are going to be on social media all week. And they're going to be and it's going to be the popularity of these moments is going to be misconstrued as, oh yes, this is the direction we need to go, not the other aspects of this that allowed this to happen, and that's the frustrating thing, because I liked at Indianapolis that we had the Brickyard 400 come back. I didn't like that the officiating as to when the caution flag came out was mangled so badly. And it's the same thing here. I liked that we had these different tire strategies and we saw drivers coming up through the field. I really wish the broadcast would have done a better job showing whose car was the fastest last time by. The old format, like we saw in the 2000 race on Friday, that would show the 5 fastest cars. It would show the entire field down to at least the top 20 or so, and it would show who was fastest, and then it would change as they would go by. And they would do that for a few laps, and you could see who was gaining or who was consistent. That really needed to happen here. I like that they showed which tire compound was done, because that needed to be done. But something about the actual speed, the actual average speed that was these cars, and who was gaining and who was able to hang on to it, that really needed to be kept up. Because when I hear like Rick Allen, or when I hear like, not just Rick Allen, but Steve Letarte in particular, just ramble on about the strategies, it just becomes like white noise to me. I need a visual graphic to actually show what's happening. And I'm sure they could figure that out, much as they did back even in the 90s then. There were some really good positives in this. I thought that we had a very competitive race in this. I thought we had a pretty competitive race in the Truck Series, even without the tire compounds. I thought we saw some very aggressive racing under green, not just restarts, but actual competitive side-by-side racing in the Truck Series event. And it felt so refreshing to see, because we weren't just having single-file racing, nobody could pass, and then we're just waiting for a restart for maybe a couple seconds of excitement before they get single-file again. Or at least that's how it seems to be presented by the booth, at least, when they're even at the track, which is a whole other issue. That's kind of where I'm coming at from on this one here. And I hope that a lot of these get discussed this week. I'm sure the oohs and ahs of the 3-car wrecking, not just one, but 2 different drivers and 2 different motions there to win this race and get into the championship, and infuriate Logano in particular. Denny Hamlin seemed, he seemed almost like he's been to this rodeo so many times that it's just like, well, yeah, I'm not happy about it, but it's like, it's just the next time that it happens. He's probably already thinking about Michigan instead. There's a lot of different angles going on here, and they're the same angles that we're still trying to figure out as to the championship format itself. And, again, I hope that if the discussion moves in the proper direction, hopefully it's going to involve that a lot more. And it's not just going to be on just, oh, look at this guy wreck these 2 people. It's like, no, there's a lot more than that going on here. And again, part of it's on Dylan, but also part of it's on the championship format and what kind of sport we want to have, what we are actually all looking to see. I think that's the important thing right off the bat here. So, roundabout way on that. I definitely want to get that out right from the start here. We'll get into the Cup Series race itself. I kind of was leading into that already with the different tire compounds. Again, I thought that was a really exciting aspect of it. When we saw Suarez charge through the field there, kind of reminded like me of what we were seeing in the last couple of Xfinity Series races here, where somebody would get tires on a, during an early caution and really charge their way through the field. Didn't we see this twice on the Alpha Prime team, where it was like Tommy Joe Martin's once, and I think Brennan Poole did it another time, where they took tires early and they flew through the field? That's kind of what it looked like. It kind of reminded me of going to Darlington, and you would see the tire fall off be such that when anybody came in to get fresh tires, even with just one compound, you would see that difference, and people were just running over each other coming up through the pack, and I think we saw that. The problem at Richmond, and I think maybe if some people were feeling that this was a little bit more boring than that, is I feel that Richmond is probably the worst photographed track on the track, at least in terms of like the camera work for the broadcast. There's great pictures that are taken there, the photographers not so much, but the worst in terms of the camera work for the actual broadcast. I think a lot of the shots move around too much, they're too tight, and I think a lot of the worst elements of it can be found from a typical Richmond race broadcast. And they don't show the moments as well. They don't hold a shot for long enough for you to figure out where you are or see somebody charging up through the field or something like that. We saw that in the 2000 race last Friday. And thank you again to everyone that tuned in on that, because we had a great discussion during that and enjoying watching the way that the track was shown. And back at a time where the track was absolutely slammed with fans, back when it had a lot of interest in the kind of racing there, back when it, the flash bulbs going off, the way the light glinted off the surface and so forth. It just looked really good. It fit that moniker of the action track, which I think is something that Richmond will certainly play clips of this Austin Dillon incident to justify. But I think increasingly in the last few years, especially once the Car of Tomorrow hit, it's just not been that kind of race. So, I think, again, I think that there was, despite this, and Matt Weaver was right to point this out with his tweet showing a shot from the grandstands there. Yeah, you saw a lot of that difference between the drivers running on option tires and the ones running the regular ones. And it was great to see that just a couple drivers tried it, and then more of them were going to try it, and then that jumbled up the order, and you were really trying to figure out like who was going to force who to come to pit road sooner. And we didn't need a bunch of cautions to have that happen. It was actually better that we didn't. I think it was brilliant to do this strategy at Richmond, knowing that you were going to have long green flag runs that would allow this to play out. Ultimately, it ended up being decided by short runs and aggressive driving. But before that, it was really compelling. Much like we shouldn't have had the cautions at the road courses for the stage cautions. I think the Indy road course race last year, despite also having pretty low attrition, was a very exciting race. And you saw directly how a bad pit stop was going to determine the outcome between Michael McDowell and Daniel Suarez in that case. So, yeah, and I think that, again, I think that was a big positive from this race. I hope that's not lost in the shuffle here, too. As to how appropriate this would be at other tracks, I don't know. I think it would be interesting. I think probably a good measure would be to try this at progressively larger tracks. I think they should try it maybe. I mean, trying it for the championship race at Phoenix may not be the best idea because, now they're going into that. Do you want to add another unpredictability to an already like almost farcical championship format where it's a toss-up between 4 different drivers? I think certainly in the spring race at Phoenix next year, they should try it. But yeah, maybe phase it in, and then are they going to do it in the rest of the playoffs? It's probably going to be iffy for that too, just for that same reason. And I certainly don't see them doing it for these last couple of races at Darlington or over at Daytona here going into the playoffs. So I wouldn't expect them to use the rest of this year unless I'm missing something in the news. I don't know if that's already planned on being used at other races. It sounded like this was something they were just kind of exploring into. But yeah, I would kind of gradually phase it into more and more tracks, start with the slower and, the slower tracks and then build up to the larger ones. And yeah, see how much of a factor it is. I think it is interesting. And, whether it's calling them primary and option or soft and hard tires, I found myself talking during this race here and I kind of was switching in and out of all of them. So I don't know what the easiest way to call them is, but I think that's probably the least of our concerns in terms of figuring all that out. But yeah, so I don't know. So I've already made myself pretty red-faced on this. I saw I got a few super chats here. I'll jump into those here in a little bit, and thank you for those as well. But hopefully I didn't. Oh, Ben, you just got home. Oh my goodness, yeah, you got quite the race to watch for sure. So we'll jump into let's see, kind of talk more about what was happening from the race itself here. So again, Austin Dillon, pending the results of post-race inspection, which we still also have to get through here, is listed as the winner. Now again, the running order actually changed since I was sitting here. So Hamlin was listed as the 5th place finisher when I first looked this up here after the finish of the race. It showed that Tyler Reddick and Bubba Wallace and Ross Chastain got around him. Certainly saw Reddick and Wallace get around him there. Reddick was pretty much ran over Dillon coming to the stripe there. Once again, getting yet another 2nd place finish here in this latest streak. He's picking up right where he left off at Indianapolis last week. Or 2 weeks ago, or 3 weeks ago here. Having a strong mid-season run here. Bubba Wallace, great run after his 80 laps led in this race last year. Did a fine job. Chastain with 5th. But again, Hamlin now shown in the 2nd spot. They're showing a margin of victory of 116 thousandths of a second, which is 1,000th of a second ahead of Tyler Reddick. It's kind of interesting that they put him in there in that spot. I think much like what we had at Kansas, where the margin of victory, I'm sure, was less than 1,000th of a second, but they said it was 1,000th, probably because their equipment just wouldn't show a smaller number than that. I think the gap between the front bumper of the car and wherever the transponder was probably something much less than 1,000th of a second there. I think in this case, maybe they just did this to just put him ahead of Reddick by the smallest margin they could have here. I don't know if that's the official results yet. I guess we'll find that out when we get the results later tonight. But Reddick in 3rd, Wallace in 4th, and Chastain in 5th now, with Hamlin moved from 5th to 2nd now in the running order. Christopher Bell had a fantastic run in this race, seemed to have the dominant car in spite of the fact that he ran into Eric Jones on pit road. I thought that damage was going to completely eliminate him from contention. I was very surprised to see him continue on without really any, it didn't seem like it really messed him up that much. I'm sure there's probably something they'll find at the shop that was twisted on that car. But he seemed just as capable of able to contend for the win, in the closing stages of this race, and indeed still shown in the 6th place finish on this one. Larson in the 7th spot, Carson Hocevar in 8th, after having a pretty solid run in this race, gets in our top 10. Chase Elliott in 9th, what was going to be the final race for Hooters for this season. Of course, Hooters parted ways with Hendrick Motorsports over an issue over the payment of sponsorship funds. And Elliott running a Coca-Cola paint scheme, which looked really nice, by the way. I like the metallic red that they kind of ran on it. And it was the kind of scheme that just made me thirsty every time I saw it. Kind of like looking at the Country Time paint schemes in that last video. But Daniel Suarez running at the top 10. Suarez, of course, just took the lead with authority on the option tires there. A great stretch run for Suarez here, where not only was he married, but also got, a contract extension over the Trackhouse effort. Congratulations to him. This on top of his dual citizenship earlier this summer. Just a huge year for him. And the win in the photo finish at Atlanta. I'm sure he wanted to win more races and be more consistent this season. But the groundwork is definitely there for him to have a great close to this year. And hopefully an even better start to next season. So we'll find out what the story is there. Ryan Blaney just outside the top 10 in the 11th spot. Kyle Busch in 12th had to actually cut off the wrist splint that he had after the wrist injury suffered in the accident towards the end at Indianapolis. So a solid finish for him. Didn't get spun out there in the closing stages. I guess we can also point out the thing that really kind of sent this race into orbit here. The fact that Austin Dillon caught and passed Denny Hamlin after a really tight battle there, the closing stages there, and had a good run to that point, was running in the top 10, then the top 5, seemed to have a real strong run. That's the part that's unfortunate about this too. I think it's going to just really overlook how solid he was running in this race and how much they'd stepped this up, and whatever changes they made over the Olympic break, whatever happened there, we didn't see really a massive change on Kyle Busch's car, although he did have to start a bit further back in the order there. But Austin Dillon, was having a really good race. And unfortunately, that's all going to get overshadowed by the way this played out. And that's too bad because, again, I think he would have been able to probably win Michigan or Daytona, if things had, if he needed to in those circumstances. But unfortunately, we're just not going to know that. We'll find out in these next couple of weeks if he still does. But, now he's in a situation where he obviously doesn't have to. But as I was saying, the thing that made this race even more absurd was, they're calling Dillon to the finish and describing, this progress they're making, how positive this is going to be, and people being so excited about it and everything. And then you have this wreck in turn one right in front of him between, of course, Ryan Preece after the thing in Indianapolis. I keep wanting to say Watkins Glen. After Indianapolis, where he spins and stalls on the track, and everybody, and then it alters the finish of that race there. I mean, nobody was probably going to catch Larson, but regardless, it definitely did, was handled differently. And Ricky Stenhouse Jr. just plowed up the wall. I was very surprised Dillon didn't get collected in that. It seemed like, the way that those two cars were crashing, Dillon was going to be caught up right in the middle of it. Somehow wasn't. And then, of course, he had the pit stop there. Dillon's crew also came through. We got to give a shout out to their pit crew there for performing under those circumstances, because you knew from seeing some of their faces on pit road, they were not looking forward to doing one more stop and like, oh my God, we lose this race and it's going to be on us. They beat Denny Hamlin off pit road. That advantage he had on pit road, I'm sure helped in that extent too. And everything was setting up for him to have a chance at actually, being able to pull off the win, just legit. Starting on the inside of the front row was probably not the best strategy. It seemed very clear that Logano was going to be able to get the drive on the high line, especially since Logano had also been impossible to pass at North Wilkesboro when they tried the two different tire compounds there. But again, the rest is history, and we'll see how all that gets untangled too. Looking further back in the order, we'll talk about the last place battle here. Parker Retzlaff, congratulations to him for making his Cup Series debut. He did finish 6 laps down in the 35th spot, but not in last place as a result of a couple of incidents, one of course, being Stenhouse's involvement in the accident with Preece. Preece still finished just a couple laps down, further up, actually 1 lap down in the 25th spot, but Stenhouse 11 laps down, eliminated in that accident, finishing next to last there. Behind Retzlaff. Retzlaff now in position to make his Cup Series debut for Beard Motorsports, no relation, at Daytona, coming down to the championship, not the championship cutoff race because of the Olympic break, of course, changing that up. Him running the 62 car at Daytona, had to run a short track race or a smaller track race to prepare for that. It sounded like the team was very happy with how he was performing, keeping the car in one piece, staying out of trouble. There was kind of a goal they had, it sounded like, about, how many laps down they were going to be and where they needed to be. So he did a solid job with that. They did have some brake shake in the early part of the race, and that didn't seem to really fix itself. Seemed like the same issue that BJ McLeod and some of these other drivers have had. David Starr, I think, had a similar issue at Martinsville driving that car. But regardless, finished the race under power, 6 laps down. And then talked about Martin Truex a little bit earlier. Easily, the probably third or fourth most shocking thing to happen in this race was Truex running in the 14th spot, coming into an event where it looked like he would be a shoo-in to get his first win of the season. Certainly in his last shot at Richmond. This is a track that used to be his white whale, where he just couldn't pull it off. And then he finally broke through, and then ever since then, he's been just, so dominant here. I mean, the Toyota teams in general have just always been really fast here in recent years. But he was running 14th when suddenly the engine just started laying down on him. He pulled behind the wall, and they were done for the night. Declared him out of the race, took the last spot from Retzlaff very quickly because everybody was running at the time between 4 laps of the leader, and we had, 15 cars on lead lap? I mean, Truex was just hanging on the lead lap even then. But Truex ends up your last place finisher. First for him since Kansas last year. The last 3 of his Cup Series last place finishes all took place in September. This is the first one that's been in August in kind of a while here. And his third last place finish in the number 19. The first for the number 19 since 2013 when Mike Bliss drove for the Humphrey Smith team. This and other statistics are going to be in the article later tonight discussing Truex. Again, pending the results of post-race inspection. Hopefully we'll have some more information on that pretty soon. So yeah, again, we'll kind of get into that as well. Let me go into the super chats before I want to kind of go into the Truck Series one And we'll talk about the Truck Series race. And again, I do have some stuff for show and tell here. Other stuff to talk about with the videos and everything. So definitely stay tuned if you want more. Thank you so much for everyone tuning in. I just looking at the numbers here. We got 193 people in here. So I must have said either something really stupid or maybe we had a really silly race, and maybe we had a little bit of both here. But hopefully this is something that has been an enjoyable part of your race watching experience here this evening. We will talk about the Truck Series race won by Ty Majeski and the last place finisher. Before I do that, I want to kind of get into the super chat here right quick. Oh, goodness, we have a few here. Let me get Michael Jensen. First of all, thank you for your message here. Congrats, Tyler Reddick, on winning since Dylan admitted to wrecking both. If then, in purpose in which NASCAR has set the precedent of disqualification with Dylan's suspension incoming, will Austin Hill get the 3 ride for the 2 races? Who knows? I mean, at this point, first of all, again, thank you for the super chat on that. Yeah, I mean, him admitting to wrecking the drivers, if we're talking the same thing about Denny Hamlin's penalty for what he mentioned on the Ross Chastain incident in Phoenix on his podcast, NASCAR has been coming down pretty hard at people wrecking each other intentionally. Now, a wreck for the lead versus a wreck for, like the tail end of the lead lap, like it was in Hamlin's case at Phoenix. Are they going to look at that different? I don't know. I mean, anything's possible at this point. And I hate to tap out on that, but I think that's, anything's possible. I'm intrigued by this thing here where Hamlin has been moved up to second in the running order. Does that mean they're going to put Logano up there and just give him the win, even though he wasn't first to the line? Boy, that would be something, again, I don't want to get in the messy situation here where it's something close to Sears Point in 91, where the driver that gets to the finish line first isn't the winner, or same thing with Regan Smith at Talladega in 2008. I don't know, but a suspension after this race, I think is certainly possible. I think him right-rearing Hamlin, especially since Chase Elliott was handed that penalty for that, especially since David Gilliland was parked at Texas in 2008 for right-rearing Montoya in that race. I think it's very possible. And if he does get suspended for a couple races where he doesn't run Michigan and is it Daytona after that? Or whatever the next couple of races. Yeah, I think it's Michigan and Daytona. Yeah, I mean, that's always certainly possible. Would that seem like a slap on the wrist? I mean, certainly, is he going to get a playoff waiver? Now we got to deal with that. That's the other problem with a playoff championship too. That's certainly a possibility. If at that point, you raise a good question there, Michael. I mean, if is Austin Hill going to step in and be in that car for those 2 races? Certainly possible, since we've seen Hill drive the 33 car earlier this year. I don't know if they put Ty Dillon in. I know we've seen Ty in the 33 as well. I'm not sure if that would be their solution. Seems like a lot of these drivers have standby drivers on hand, like we saw with Corey Heim over in the deal there with Eric Jones and all that. So I'm sure whoever it is on there. Then Hill may be a possibility. I'm not sure. Depends, I guess, on how much focus they want to give to the Xfinity Series Championship here as well. Michael Jensen, thank you for the other super chat here as well. His mistake, again, referencing to Dylan here, was admitting he did it on purpose. If he said he got loose or his brakes went away, he'd be fine. Admitting it on purpose is a disqualification and suspension based on NASCAR precedent. Again, we could see that. We don't know what the results are of post-race inspection yet. Anything could be turning out from this. You raise a very good point. Obviously, we've seen a lot of issues with consistency with NASCAR when it comes to the rules. Especially when it comes to something that happens in the late stages of the race. It seems like if they want a certain outcome or if they just want the race to just be over, they're perfectly happy to just kind of let things play out that way. But yeah, if they want to be consistent with some of these, that would probably be the way to do it. I'm not sure, again, and that's a problem is there's so many of these different penalties. Is it going to be probation? Is it going to be a suspension? Is it going to be a disqualification? What is going to be too much? And even if they disqualify him, who are they going to, are they give the win to Reddick, like you said? Are they going to give the win to either of the drivers he wrecked, like Logano or Hamlin? Probably not. I think that's probably the less likely. Although, again, I'm intrigued by Hamlin getting moved to second when he was clearly fifth when the results were first shown there. I don't know what's happening. I think there's a lot happening behind the scenes, I'm sure, right now to figure all this out. But I don't know. We're about to find out. I think whatever that's going to be is probably going to be at least the precedent for the championship going forward here. But we'll find out. We'll find out. Good question, though. Mr. Bad Guy, thank you for the super chat there as well. I personally think this sets a dangerous precedent going forward. Yeah, again, I think that, do we want to have, again, it's cool if you have like drivers up there that can rough somebody out of the way. It's one of the best aspects of NASCAR racing, that unlike other motorsports where cars just crumble to pieces if they even get close to each other, in NASCAR, you can bump people out of the way, using the chrome horn. Earnhardt wasn't the only example of this. Other drivers have done it. Jeff Gordon, Darrell Waltrip, anybody you can think of is, I'm sure, been in one situation or another that they've been able to just be real physical and physical kind of racing, especially at the short tracks like Richmond, which despite the fact that it usually hasn't had a lot of great races in recent years, still is the potential of having those kind of finishes and certainly could. But yeah, I think that if you had a situation here where things are just stepping up more and more, yeah, it does set a dangerous precedent. What's going to happen in Michigan or, what else is going to be happening down the road? I don't know. But it does set a dangerous precedent, and I do think it goes hand in hand with the championship format. So again, thank you for the super chat on that one. Bowser Jr. XD, glad the race ended under caution because otherwise this would be in the top 100 closest cup finishes, and it would have been pissed to put it there. There you go. So Bowser Jr., thank you for the super chat there as well. Always tracking the margins of victory. Again, it looks like 116 thousandths of a second. Unofficially the margin of victory here on this, but yeah. That's probably why the order again was shuffled there. The moment of caution must have been sometime before Hamlin got passed by Reddick and Bubba Wallace, but sometime after Joey Logano was wrecked. And Logano seemed like he was just limping around the track. He's actually credited still 19.798 seconds back in the lead in the 19th spot, the last car on the lead lap. That, I believe, was where he was when the leaderboard was first published, so no change on that. But again, thank you for the super chat there as well on that. The Judo Joker, thank you for your message as well. Spinning Joey equals not good. Hooking Denny, suspend him. Exactly. I agree on that. I think that again, while both of them are aggressive moves, and one is certainly, I could see even in this championship format, NASCAR probably would turn a blind eye to, the bumping Logano, even as desperate and clearly blatant as obvious as it was, wrecking Hamlin on top of it in a separate move. That's a little bit more problematic. And it probably would be something that NASCAR is not going to, I don't know how long they're going to wait on this. We've seen penalties come out, Tuesday or Wednesday in the week there. I think, again, I'm feeling more and more the longer this is going, and I haven't really looked at my Twitter feed here since then. I'm sure it's on fire right now, just like anybody else. It's, yeah, goodness, just refreshed again. It's, I feel like more it's going to be some kind of penalty going forward rather than something backtracking to this race itself. I think unless there's something that's illegal on the car or, I don't know. I don't see them disqualifying him for this. I don't see them taking away the win. I think they're going to have some issue with the running order just because of the moment of caution. But I think going forward will probably be any penalty. And yeah, it probably should be at least a one race suspension. From what we've seen with, again, Chase Elliott before, Gilliland, I don't think was suspended for his deal. But Kyle Busch was for his incident with Ron Hornaday, in the truck series. So, again, trying to kind of find some form of consistency there. I think that's, really an issue. But I think that NASCAR seems like they fudge the rules a little bit when it comes down to actually battling for the win. If it's something further back in the order or if it's something earlier in the race, it seems like they come down on that a bit harder, at least in recent years. Again, this is kind of a different situation where you have like a couple different wrecks. And doing a couple of those, that's where it's a little bit of pushing the boundaries. And, even when he won the Daytona 500, he just wrecked Almirola, as savage and dangerous as that was. But imagine if he caused a second wreck coming to the start finish line, because either Bubba Wallace or Denny Hamlin or any of the other drivers behind him were about to pass him. I think that would have, been looked at, pretty badly too, as well. It should have been. But it's an unfortunate situation, on both ends, but I do think, it could be, what happens there. But I can see, people that, don't want there to be a suspension. I can see where you're coming from on it too. Because yeah, I mean, do you want at the same time, drivers to not get physical out there? I mean, you do want them to be. But I just think that in this particular case, this is an exceptional enough case, again, wrecking two different drivers in two different circumstances to get the win. Clearly these drivers have, every right to be upset about that. It's something that, probably deserves a closer look or at least drawing some kind of line there. But again, I think long-term it should consider a re-examination of the playoff system. And I feel like that's going to be kind of lost in the shuffle this week. I feel like the discussion is probably going to move away from that through the week, especially if he does get suspended, which is, even if that should be an outcome on that, I feel like that's going to kind of distract from that a little bit too. So we'll see. But again, thank you for the super chats on that. We'll jump into the truck series discussion here as well. And we'll do some trivia after our show and tell segment here in just a little bit. So we'll kind of get into that. Ty Majeski, congratulations for the victory there in what was the championship cutoff race. That actually caught me by surprise. It would have been nice if the network kind of promoted that a little bit more. I try to keep track of that myself, but actually caught me off guard. I didn't put it in my entry list article even going into Friday there. I seem to remember it seemed like it was usually Bristol, but schedule changed in the Olympic break and so forth. But regardless, Majeski wins the race. Daniel Dye squeaks his way into the playoffs with an 8th place finish, getting ahead of Tanner Gray, who ends up back in the 12th spot there. So unable to join his brother Taylor in the championship battle there. I thought a very entertaining race. I thought that the broadcast was showing some signs of life. I don't want to be entirely dismissive. There was that early incident with Matt Mills where they showed the accident when it happened. They had a cameraman that was in turns 1 and 2 that turned around and focused and caught the moment in turns 3 and 4. And then they even had another alternate shot, which still had like their watermark from whatever camera it was from. That was the best angle of it that showed how much the wall moved when Mills hit the wall. And they showed all of this. They didn't leave any kind of mystery to it. That was very good. I thought that was a very positive sign, in spite of the fact that the booth was clearly not at the track and was over in the Charlotte studios, which already is going to be a demerit on the broadcast in general. It's just not going to be the same when they're in person. And already this group, especially Jamie Little, unfortunately, just does not put on a very good play-by-play from the booth there. And it's unfortunate because she has the skills, she has the knowledge. Maybe it's just an issue with the direction or what, but it's just not there. And it's unfortunate because when later wrecks happened, either we didn't get a clear replay of it, like the one that caught up Thad Moffitt and Keith McGee and some of these other drivers in the field there. The play-by-play just really became kind of flat, and that was unfortunate. Because we had some really good racing when and there were some times that the camera actually showed when people were going 3 and 4 wide through the field and seeing people further back in the pack racing. If you just showed the leaders the whole time, it wasn't going to be a very interesting race. You probably think, oh, this guy's just running away with it. Who cares? But a lot of what was happening back in the pack, we actually did get some glimpses of. And I think production-wise, they actually stepped it up a little bit. And I want to really give them a shout-out on that because I thought that it was a notable improvement. And it was something that I was really looking for, especially after the watch-along last Friday, of seeing just how often these drivers run side by side. A lot of times when somebody ran on old tires or tried some different strategy, it really got pretty intense. And we saw some good 3 and 4 wide racing. And it didn't have to be a restart. Sometimes it was when somebody would start dropping back, but other times it'd just be the middle of a run and people would just get stacked up and they would try to work their way around and somebody would have so much momentum in the high lane that they would stay right with them. And it was really exciting to see. And it would have been nice if the commentary would catch back up with that and describe who was doing what and who's moving up and who's falling back and all that stuff and just stay engaged with it. I think that would have been a really good broadcast at the end of it. Unfortunately, it was pretty much just the same that we've had on the FS1 broadcast lately, which was unfortunate. But I thought it was a very good race. I bet it was even better in person. And I think it was a great kickoff to the weekend there. I was very pleasantly surprised from that for sure. What was happening behind the scenes, however, was your last place finisher, Jerry Bowman, who unfortunately had a very frustrating weekend there, driving the Randy Young Motorsports entry, the number 20, the Young's Motorsports truck, that is. Bowman had attempted to qualify for 2 races last year, including Richmond. The other was at the Bristol Dirt Race, where they had an issue with the clutch plate inside the truck there. Didn't even complete a lap of his heat race, and ultimately didn't make the main event in that race there. Those were driving for G2G, which of course no longer exists, the former number 46 entry. Bowman was kind of an interesting figure from looking at his biography online there, that he's a business owner of a marine company there that bears his name, and works with a couple other companies and affiliates that service with him there, working on constructing docks and other services like that. So that was part of the branding that was on the truck this weekend. He runs late models. He's apparently, according to a video that he posted on his Facebook page, he's been involved in racing for 35 years, followed his father into late models, and trying to make it into the truck series. Finally makes his debut in this race and has all kinds of problems. Spins out in turn 4 in practice, spins out in turn 4 in qualifying. Both times avoids hitting the wall. However, he's slowest in practice. Does still make the show, even though Trey Hutchins attempted to run this race and ran 3 miles an hour faster. The 14 team that Hutchins drove for has attempted fewer races. Bowman got to qualify for the race and start the event, but unfortunately in the opening laps, Bowman's truck right from the start had radio issues. Nobody could hear the driver over the radio, but the driver confirmed through hand signals that he could hear them. During those radio transmissions, they're still trying to talk him around the track and try to convince him, what the best groove is around there. But right from the start, he was already having trouble meeting minimum speed, although NASCAR themselves didn't actually tell him to pick up the speed and black flag him until about 17 laps into the race. He came in for one pit stop, one very brief pit stop, and came back out there just mere seconds later. He was still not up to pace, and he was parked for not maintaining minimum speed. If you look at a lot of older races where somebody is black flagged off the track, the term flagged is used, indicating short term for black flagged. In this case here, in more recent years, flagged at least hasn't been the reason for a last place finisher since 1993 in the Cup Series. But in recent years, they just say too slow. That's the shorthand. I swear there must be a set list of reasons out that they have. But that's the one that they use. They said minimum speed over the radio, but too slow is the reason out in the running order. And so that was the exact situation. He had one chance to fix it, which is the same thing we usually hear. This is usually a much bigger issue at the concrete tracks. Norm Benning has had issues with this at Bristol and Dover. He's not the only one. I mean, other teams that have been running back there have had issues as well, other single truck teams in particular. But this case here, that was definitely the situation for him. And after 17 laps completed, he ends up being your last place finisher here. So Bowman, your last place finisher in that in his series debut, and I believe the first for the number 20 in a truck series race at Texas, at Richmond, excuse me. So that was a different situation there too. Andrew Church, thank you for tuning in there too. But yeah, so we'll find out. We'll find out what's going on here as well. So let's see here. Alrighty. So we got down to here. We talked about Jerry Bowman, just kind of checking other stories from here. Corey Heim back in the 16th spot, very uncharacteristic there for how dominant he's been this year. Caden Honeycutt got knocked around there a bit, finished back in the 14th spot. Connor Hall, want to talk about him briefly here. Him getting into the Bill McAnally truck, making his series debut like Jerry Bowman, but had a very good truck under him, got into the top 10 in the closing stages of that race, finishing 10th in his series debut. And Stephen Parsons right behind him in the Charlie Henderson truck, finishing in 11th spot. So fine runs for both of them. Lane Riggs getting another top 5, trying to push to win the race there. That was one of the best battles we had. It was once Riggs was catching the leaders and you had a real tight battle up front. Man, that was so good. That was the kind of racing that, you would traditionally see at Richmond, where you have multiple grooves that are equally fast. And if you have, enough, strong enough field of drivers that are all that good at that phase of the race, you can put on just an electric show. But unfortunately, it's just, not as common these days. But again, even without the different tire combinations, we still had, I think, a very solid truck series race. And Ty Majeski definitely earned it there at the finish. So congratulations to him on the victory there as well. And the feature on Jerry Bowman is already up on the lastcar.info page. So that is already up there, and we'll go from there. So I kind of want to transition into our show and tell segment here. But first, I'll go ahead and let me bring this up here. Oh, hang on. I kind of look at the right window here. We'll bring out the late 90s deal here for our trivia section here. I'll have you guys pick which category you'd like, and I'll do the show and tell here in the meantime. And we'll do that. So thank you, everyone, for tuning in. We still have 160 people in here, so thank you. If you'd like to stick around, we'll do some NASCAR trivia and NASCAR show and tell here at the same time, and we'll go from there. So, again, the categories on this, it's just a simple question and answer thing we just do for fun. It's the NASCAR, pits, teams, tracks, drivers, and the wild card. So think of it like Jeopardy, although you don't have to answer it in the form of a question. We can go ahead and just pick which category you'd like, and then we'll do some questions from that. So the categories, once again, NASCAR, pits, teams, tracks, drivers, and the wild card. So I'll go ahead and just set that aside here while you guys have picks here as well. So had kind of an interesting weekend here, even before this Richmond race even began. Something I'd like to show here right off the bat here is I received this package, and I'm going to go ahead and show you the front of it here. It does have an address on here, but it's not my personal address. It's my P.O. box. But that's kind of part of one of the reasons that this was kind of anything of note. If you'll notice on this, it's addressed to Thad Moffitt of the Truck Series driver. And this is my P.O. box, which is on the masthead to my website. So again, no problem showing it here. And again, while I'm mentioning it here, I do have a P.O. box here. So if anybody wants their book signed or anything like that, anything with like self-addressed stamped envelope, that's the address for it. It's also on the website there if you're looking for it. But yeah, this gave me pause. We picked it up over the box, and it's got Thad Moffitt's name on it. Now, of course, Thad Moffitt does not use my P.O. box. I don't think he even has a residence here on the West Coast. But this came in, and what I looked at, and of course the return address on this, is from the Kaylee Mills Foundation, which is actually a foundation that represents, it's about driver safety, particularly among the youth. We're talking about responsible driving and trying to do like outreach programs there. And Thad's actually involved in this. And so actually I've already contacted the team, which is already a complicating factor on this too, because because of course Thad Moffitt was driving for Faction 46, and then he was able to switch over to Randy Young's team at the same time, and then that worked out there too. So okay, I'm like, okay, well, which address do I send it to? Because I don't want to send it to an address where the shop's no longer functional or anything like that. But I did find a contact us page on his site. I've reached out to him and said, look, I'll drop this in the mail. I'll send it to whatever address you need it to and make sure you get it. I'm sure the foundation intended this to be a surprise, so I hate to kind of ruin the surprise on that. But I did want to bring this back out. But basically what's in here is it's got some items that's just thanking him for representing the cause. And I looked up on their Facebook page, and he's actually he actually did do some stuff for this organization. They actually thanked him for speaking out for this program. I don't know if he's had the logo on his truck or anything, but here, I'll just go ahead and show you. It wasn't even sealed, so I'll just show you. It's got like stickers and lanyards and other stuff here. And again, just a thank you note and all that. And again, I want to make sure he gets this. So I have no interest in hanging on to this. I would have interest in donating into the organization, though. It sounds like they have a great foundation, but I know for a fact that I haven't on this one. So if I don't hear back from Thad's group, I definitely want to contact the foundation here and make sure this gets forwarded there, because it's some nice stuff, and I'm sure they wanted to make sure that he gets represented there. But yeah, isn't that a bizarre thing? Now, I've only written about Thad Moffitt, I think, once on the site. So what probably happened was they went to they Googled Thad Moffitt. Maybe my website came up, and they misconstrued it as it being like his personal website. And they saw this address, which is, again, on the masthead. This is, it's nothing. That's why, again, I don't have a problem showing it there. Yeah, it got set. That's the only reason I can think that this would have happened. So I don't know. I don't know. I don't think Thad Moffat intended it to get sent to me. So I have zero problem getting it forwarded here. So I already need to go by the post office box tomorrow anyway. So, but I thought that was kind of strange. Yeah, isn't that kind of a little bit weird too? I don't know. So, I know I haven't cleared out the post office box in a while. But that was very unusual. And I was like, okay, well, do I even open it? Luckily it wasn't even open. It wasn't even sealed. So I was like, okay, that's a little unusual too. But yeah, that's why. I'm sure it was just like something they were sending to thank him for it. So hopefully, this gets over back to his hands there. And if you see the logo on the 46 truck, I'm going to really check with some people over at the track there. If they see this logo on there, maybe it's something that's part of this. So that would be really exciting to see. And of course, I consider donating to that organization too. I have not done that yet. But I'd be happy to, because it sounds like they do some great work. And they've been actually one of the first posts on their Facebook page. They're also involved with Joseph Newgarden too. Apparently Newgarden has been there. So thankfully Newgardens didn't get sent to me either. If something like that pops up, that'll be the thing. But I couldn't help but think that was just a really bizarre, moment or anything there. So that was kind of a weird, situation. So that happened. I also want to kind of mention, thank you so much for those of you checking out the eBay listings there for the Roaring Racers there. I had a order that I picked up that I found a couple of different these die cast from back in the day in the 90s. And I'll show you. I have one right here. Where is it? Here we go. This is a perfect example of it. So these were really fun. I know I think I've shown this in the Bobby Hamilton video here as well. But they had these unibody diecasts that were significantly larger than the average 64 scale Racing Champions cars back in the day. And I found a collection of a few of these loose for on eBay, and I had a few that I was looking for. And then I had a couple that were duplicates. So I figured, okay, I want to kind of share the wealth. So I put that up on eBay, and that's where those blind bags came from there. So if you check out the eBay link that's on my Twitter page, these are the kind of cars that are in those bags. I don't believe this particular one is among them, but there were duplicates of some other ones that I picked up over the years, and those are on that page. So if you're ever looking to, let's see, I don't know if this one works. Let's see. Nope. No, that one doesn't work. I'll see if I can find one that works. I brought a couple of them up here. Let's see. There we go. This one, ooh, that doesn't sound good. Okay, that one probably needs a battery change, but you kind of have a Bill Elliott one here too. And usually you just squeeze the wheel and it'll make that little sound. Hopefully it won't sound quite that bad. There's another one that's, I'm not even sure. That's probably just going to harsh the mic there. But yeah, so that's that listing is on the eBay page on my Twitter page. And also if you're interested in any of the stickers from my website as well, those are available. I still have a deal on those, but you can check that out on my Twitter page at LastCarOnBrock. We still have, let's see, I think we have 3 more of those sold, or 3 more of those available for those of you that are interested in those. So if you're interested in that, check that out. I do pick them at random, and they're all from like 1990 to 1992, so those are really fun. So hopefully that'll be something that'll be something that if you're interested in, we could do that. I know we did blind bags a few years ago, so I had the opportunity to do that again. I figured that would be something fun to throw in on that as well. If you also forgive the plug here, at the same time, I also don't want to ignore the reason that I'm wearing this hat today here. Of course, today is the anniversary of the accident that took the life of J.D. McDuffie and his accident on lap 5 of the 1991 Budweiser at the Glen. I think it's particularly solemn on a day like this where you actually have a Cup Series race here at the same time. I know that Father Jeff Rose did that great invocation, I believe it was at Michigan a few years ago, right before COVID, and was talking about JD there as well. The schedule, of course, has now changed a bit this year, where we have Watkins Glen now in September, later on this year. But I want to thank again those of you that were checking out the J.D. McDuffie book. I know we've had people that have picked up the book on Amazon or the audio book. Had a couple of other sales on that this last week. Those of you who are interested, again, this is what the book looks like here. The second edition that I released, I believe it was 2 years ago, and again has a lot of original pictures there from the McDuffie archive. as well as other photographers involved with the team as well. And again, I'm very proud of how this book came out. I was thinking about just how surreal of an experience it was going with with Charlie Birch, visiting his place, who was hosting us that weekend, myself and Lasbro, as well as Wendy McDuffie, Linda and Wendy McDuffie, Linda being JD's daughter. It was just a tremendous experience that weekend. A lot of people helped out in terms of promoting this book, which is a challenge since it was, a self-published book basically at that point. But I'm very pleased with the response there that it's had, and I'm glad to hear people are still interested in it. And there were a lot of great tributes earlier today, people sharing their memories of JD. There was another person that was tweeting me earlier about he was a young child in 1988 when he was actually, actually got to sit in the car that JD qualified at Pocono that year, which was even more significant because that was the year that JD burned his hands in that terrible accident at Daytona, and then was able to actually get back in the car later that year. So part of his recovery phase there too. But he was always very good with the fans, and as quiet as he was, and stayed in the sport a very long time and really tried to compete as best he could. And again, in this discussion tonight, where we're talking about the spirit of competition and what the sport is and what racing is, J.D. McDuffie certainly was, to paraphrase what was said of Dale Earnhardt those years later. That was certainly the case there. So, again, Godspeed, J.D., and again, thank you so much, everyone, for your interest in the J.D. McDuffie book there as well. Let's see. Well, let's see. Where are we with the categories for the trivia portion? We'll get a few questions here. If you guys have any other questions or anything else that I haven't covered from this week, I can check my notes. I know there's been a few other stories here. It seems like they got kind of buried in everything else that was happening here today, certainly. I want to make sure I mention, I don't think I mentioned this. I don't believe I mentioned this in our Indianapolis show, but it happened right around the same time. There was a good core race online event there, and Gabe Wood reached out to me there about doing a sponsorship thing that he had already paid to sponsor the event, and he wanted to call it the After Allen race there, and had that brought on board there. So I wanted to thank Gabe again there for that. Again, I always run into him there over the track. He's always great to talk to. I hate that I'm missing out in the second half of this year because we're not planning on doing any other trackside coverage this year. But that was a very nice gesture there. And the commentators for that race, this was back in July, did a great job promoting, discussing the series and how much they enjoyed the video on Alan Kowicki there. So big thanks to them as well. I don't remember if I mentioned that at Indy, but I definitely want to make sure to mention it before it gets too much further along here at the same time. Talking about Corey LaJoie, almost was your last place finisher in this race here, was the last place finisher in the spring race at Richmond. The news, of course, broke over the Olympic break that he will not be in the 7 car next year. Rumors still swirling about who's going to be in that car and what's going to become of that, or where LaJoie is going to work out there. An unfortunate deal, but, again, it's such a brutal business these days, and there's so few cars out there, so few charters out there. And, we've seen this with other drivers. We've seen this with Matt DiBenedetto. We've seen this with others that have tried to make a name for themselves in the charter era. And I think that their window of being able to compete and become competitive is so much more narrow than before. If you don't really, strike out right away, it could be a real problem. And LaJoie has had flashes of brilliance, especially on the super speedways, but undoubtedly he's had his share of controversy. And I'm sure the incident he had at Pocono was, not helpful in that sense, and other things that were going along. I always hope that, a driver, can work things out if it's something that he could find either in the Xfinity series or the Truck series, or if he finds another ride in the Cup series. All you can do is just wish them the very best of luck and then find out what happens from there. But it's a difficult situation one way or the other. The other story that just broke earlier this week I was asked about this during the live stream last Friday, was the baseball game to be played over in the Bristol infield next summer. Pretty exciting for the track. Of course, they did the college football game there a few years ago, and it seemed like that was pretty popular as far as I can tell. College football seems to draw, I think, much bigger crowds than baseball does. Regardless, I guess, kudos for thinking outside the box and trying something else. I'm sure these track owners are trying to find ways to maximize the success of their year, if it's not just racing events to other things. We've certainly seen the opposite, where NASCAR teams have competed on baseball diamonds or really small tracks like that, or competed on football fields like Soldier Field, or of course more recently the Clash at the Coliseum. So again, everybody just figuring things out. Baseball's in kind of a weird spot right now, I would say. But they're trying the stuff they're trying is interesting. What they did with the Field of Dreams game a couple of years ago. They had the other historic one earlier this year. That was cool. Just trying some different things. I guess it's nice to be invited to the party. If that's going to be the way it's going there. So, if that's the case, then I think that'll be, something to watch at the same time. But we'll certainly find out along the way there too. So let me check out here. Let's see. Drivers. What other categories we still have? Wayne Stell, thank you for picking up the book there. I appreciate that. Pockers just posted an Elton Sawyer interview on Twitter. Might watch that one there too. I guess we'll have to. Let's see. Tracks, wild card. I'm not sure of other categories here on this. Ryan Vargas. Okay, good post here, Tim. I'm just looking at yours here. Ryan Vargas posted the 2010 race where Edwards wrecked the 22. He got 60. I guess you mean the Keselowski wreck there, 12. He got 60 driver points and owner points reduction, $25,000 penalty and probation, but no suspension. Okay, and that was during the boys have at it era too. I know there was some reference at that. So I don't know. This is why it's so hard to actually try to bring up what should be happening in penalties and so forth. You try to examine the evidence and compare like to like. And again, in that case there, it was, an accident in the middle of the race. It didn't have bearing on the finish. Or it was, I guess it was, wasn't that in the closing stages? I think that was the one where like Montoya was going to win Atlanta and he was catching Kurt Busch, and then that wreck happened and the race ended under caution. I think that's what it was. I think, unless I've got a wire across there, but I think that was what was happening. There was something absurd that was going on in that event, but regardless, that'll be something else to look at. Only 5 prior starts at 5 flags. That for Bowman there. The Rego 1456. Yeah, I'm not sure. So, I mean, again, it's just an unfortunate situation with that too. Alrighty. I don't know which category. I've only seen a couple of votes here for categories. I see one for drivers, one for tracks, and one for wild card. So we'll kind of split it up here. Let's see. Do I see other ones here from back there? Not sure if I see that. Alrighty. Okay. So, alrighty. Let's just jump into tracks. I don't think we've done that one lately, so we'll do a couple questions on that, and we'll wrap up that here for the show tonight. So thank you again, everyone, for tuning in. We'll do some question and answer on here. And again, if you have any other questions from this week that I didn't cover or anything else you'd like to ask me about, I can talk about that. I did mention I was going to tease something about the videos. Next video on Rise of the Field Fillers on Carter Racing is coming together very nicely. Brian Hallman provided some other great pictures here earlier this week that I'm adding to the list. I need to get the rest of the quotes transcribed, at least into the script there. But it's coming along very well. I think I fully expect that to be out this month to get that out there. And so, again, those of you in the Patreon, $5 and up levels, patreon.com/LastCarOnBrock, you'll have advanced access to that video. And that will be coming up here as well. I also want to mention this too. Those of you, those of you watching the videos I do for NASCAR Man History, I know that there was a video recently that he did where it was using some modification there to the voice in that. I just want to make very clear that we're on perfectly good terms there for videos. I'm still narrating videos for him, the longer form ones. What he's trying out for those videos, like I think it's the one on the Hanford device for CART, is he's trying out different things here for more short form videos to get them out a bit quicker. Because, of course, for me recording it, he's got to send me the script. I got to record it and send it back to him and editing and all that. And that can take a bit longer. So he's trying out some different things for short form things. He doesn't have access to as much sound equipment. So he's trying some other things with that. So anybody that has any concerns about that, I've been meaning to say something about that for a while because I don't want him to get drugged through the mud on that because he's really puts together fantastic content. I thought the video itself was actually really interesting. But again, with the voice recording there, he's trying some different stuff there with some modulation and all that. But I am still narrating some videos here for him as well, especially the more long form content there. So again, I'm sure he's seen everybody's comments and stuff on that, and I'm sure he's spoken on that as well. So I don't want to speak out of turn on that, but I do want to mention it while I'm talking about the videos here in general. So we are still doing some videos on his channel, and there'll be some more projects coming up on that. So which are for the $1 members on that $1 and up there, you get advanced access to the videos I record there for him as well. So something to look forward to on that. Alrighty. Let's see here. Oop, that one's a little bit too easy. How about this? First question here. Who holds records at Darlington for most poles and fastest times? Now, again, this is as of the late 90s, so that may change based on today. I'll read that again. Who holds records at Darlington for most poles and fastest times is the question. Let's see. Busch was not losing that race. I don't know. I thought Montoya was catching him. I thought if that went to the finish and we didn't have any cautions, Montoya was going to catch him. As to if he would have passed him, who's to say? That would have decided that. But I think that was between that one and the one where he ran the Depends car at Richmond were probably his best shots at winning an oval track. And he wanted to. It just didn't quite work out that way. Who holds records at Darlington for most poles and fastest times? That's the question. You got a lot of guesses for David Pearson, Ricky Rudd, Cale Yarborough, Bobby Allison. That's another one, too. Where is that? This is a great thing, too. Those Roaring Racers I kind of mentioned, they even made Bobby Allison in the 88 paint scheme. Look at this beast. I mean, I know it's got the Miller High Life sponsorship censored and the Bobby Allison logo, but just a gorgeous car. I mean, I still think the 1992 Richard Petty paint scheme is the best. This one is probably a solid second place there. That gold and white Buick, this kind of unibody that they used on the cars back then is actually a pretty good choice. But yeah, just a really nice one too. Does this one make sound? Oh, it kind of does. Doesn't sound very good. Okay. But you get the idea there. Alrighty. Okay. Who holds records at Darlington for the most poles and fastest times? So again, Bobby Allison, David Pearson, Petty. We got several guesses here already. The answer is David Pearson. A lot of you got that one. David Pearson is indeed the correct answer. Make sure the camera's in focus. Good. David Pearson looks like 611 Hornet. I believe you were the first one to get that. Bean Boy 89. There you go. Kids NASCAR Crazy and so forth. Wayne Stell. A lot of you got that one. Alrighty. All right. Not that one. Let's see. Yeah. That one's a little bit too easy, too. No. Some of these, I think the question already pretty much provides the answer. Okay. No. Oh, here we go. This is kind of a rule from the 90s here. How many laps does a driver run around Charlotte to qualify for the Winston? That is the All-Star race back in the 90s there. How many laps does a driver run around Charlotte to qualify for the Winston? Yeah, gotcha. Got a Ricky Rudd fan in here. Right on. They should have made that in one of these. I don't think they did. I have a few here. Here's one. Here's kind of the box I've been digging them out of here. Oh, this one doesn't kind of show it very well. Okay, I'm going to try to open this up, but this will probably end up just spilling them all over the place. That doesn't show very well on camera. Oh, how about this? Here, let's just move the camera down here. I'll move this down here. You can kind of take a look at this. Boop, 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 boop. Bringing it down. There you go. So, yeah, I mean, they even made Earnhardt back then. I mean, you got Ken Bouchard, 72 car here, Rusty Wallace. And again, a lot of the censored sponsors, kind of like I was talking about in the Country Time video. You don't have the Kodiak Bear on the Ken Schrader scheme or the Skoll scheme on the Harry Gant. But then some of the other ones here, yeah, you still get the, this is kind of interesting too, how the Pennzoil car doesn't have like the same font. It's kind of the old Country Time font there as well. But yeah, I mean, I just love this old body style here. So I've been collecting these for a while. But they really come out nice. So these are kind of, again, the ones that I have, not these specifically ones, but I do have some duplicates of these that are online there too. Just a few of them left there at the same time. But these are fun. I wish they would make something like that again. I think that would be something really popular these days. Yeah, 72 car is a weird one. Yeah, here, I'll bring it up. I'll give you a closer look at it. It's actually Ken Bouchard, I think it was after he lost the ride at the Bob Wickham team, because he was the one that drove the 10 car before Derek Cope. You can kind of see that. There you go. Give you kind of a better, let me get it in focus here. There you go. But yeah, kind of the Auto Palace paint scheme on this one. There you go. Kind of get the driver's side of it there. I love this font on the roof, like the name font. If I was ever into racing, if I ever got behind the wheel, I'd always like to have this particular font on the roof. I think that would be cool. But yeah. Well, and I guess we got to bring the Earnhardt one out for the Dillon win. So there we go. So this is just a very simplified version of the Earnhardt scheme, more like the 88 scheme with the silver numbers. But yeah, still adding some of the detail there. Just very, very simple, kind of dressed down version of the cars there, but still a pretty nice one, though. Yeah, the Greg Trammell one. Oh, you can bring that one out. Here. Get like an ARCA car, I believe. This is ARCA. I think that was. There you go. Again, the gold rims, some of these here with the different ones. They put actually a lot of the sponsors on there, even when it's a kind of a limited sponsor thing. And this one has kind of more of the signature script on the roof. Just looks really nice. So they did a good job on these. Again, some have more detail than others. I think I have the Jimmy Means one in here that just kind of has that other one. Yeah, I think Earnhardt had that checkered deck lid pretty much his whole career. I think he still had that even in 2001, if I remember correctly. I think he did. I'll have to look. Let's see here. The question was still, how many laps does a driver run around Charlotte to qualify for the Winston? We got guesses all over the place. 4 plus a pit stop. 4, 3, 10, 2 already. And the answer is 3. 3 is the answer on here, to be more on the nose. And Bean Boy 89 looks like you were the first one on that. A few more of you got that one. Cordy 100. Wayne Stell looks like you got that too. Yeah, I could see 4. I mean, it would kind of be that different deal. Just got here. I don't know if you want me to spoil it, Desert Fox, but yeah, it's definitely a finish. You're gonna want to watch it. Alrighty. Do we have a call on inspection? I don't think we do. I can talk about that too. Let's see. Wow, 26 lead changes, a track record. Previous record was 25 from February 1991 and March 1996. Thank you, Jonathan Feld, for getting the statistic on that. Field, excuse me. Jonathan Field here over at the Racing Experts there, providing the statistics there. So, yeah, track record, number of lead changes. That's definitely, it certainly looked that way from how intense this was and how it played out for sure. Whoop, make sure I'm opening the right window here. What do I think of Grant Enfinger's number 93 car in 2011? I think it's an interesting story, but I actually tried twice to get that story from Grant, and he really, really, really did not want to talk about it. I actually videotaped my first attempt at it over at Sears Point when he was driving Noah Gragson's car last year. And yeah, he was very cool about it, but you could tell he did not want to talk about it. So it's an interesting scheme, the Seneca Motorsports thing. I remember that back in 2011 at Homestead, and him trying to qualify for the championship race, and it just didn't work out, and they didn't do anything in 2012, and it was just kind of a weird time. But yeah, that was an interesting story. I'm if it was a setback in his career, I'm glad that he was able to regroup as well as he did between ARCA and then now, of course, in the Truck Series. And I think he did a respectable job in the Cup Series when he was driving Gragson's car. I think under pretty difficult circumstances, since you had the Truck Series running Sears Point the once, and then but that was like the first time in years that they did that. So it really wasn't a place that he was very familiar with, at least as far as I knew. But yeah. Next look question here. Here we go. Where did Robbie Gordon win his only Busch pole in 1997? Where did Robbie Gordon win his only Busch pole in 1997? That's the next question. Yeah, I can definitely understand drivers not want to talk about. I mean, that's kind of relevant to my next episode of Field Fillers as well. There was an interview I was really, really trying to get, but the more I've done these interviews and the more I've done this, I've found a lot of situations where people just won't tell you no necessarily. They'll just kind of make you feel like you probably don't want to do that. And I try to respect that when I can. I mean, if I can get the information, it'll be good. And in this particular case, in the Carter racing one, I think it would have been really helpful. But I mean, I'm glad I got what I got in that. I did get another interview in there. There's a couple clips in there. And I have as much of the story as I could possibly find. I mean, I've already taken way too long getting this one together. But of course, if this particular person is willing to do an interview, I'd be happy to do an addendum to it. So that would be, any issue there, but it'll be interesting. I think it'll be a good story here. I was actually, I have to record another segment for it after the show tonight. So that's what I'll be doing tonight here, before we kind of regroup here. Reading the question again here. Where did Robbie Gordon win his only Busch pole in 1997 is the question. 97. Video about BK Racing. That would be interesting. I haven't ruled that out. There's a lot of interesting small teams in the sports history. We've barely scratched the surface. So yeah. Let's see. Yeah, I guess it's for Atlanta, Watkins Glen, Talladega, Richmond, several for Atlanta, one more for Dover. Okay, here we go. Where did Robbie Gordon win his only Busch pole in 97? The answer is Atlanta. Atlanta, the spring race at Atlanta, the last race on the oval, the true oval before they reconfigured it. That was what I was almost going to do that for one of our watch-alongs here during the Olympic break. And again, thank you everyone that tuned in on those. I think those were a lot of fun. I'm not planning on doing those. I'm probably not going to do another one of those until after the season wraps up. And we'll explore that after the season's over with, because during the week when I do the entry list articles and the videos, that takes up an awful lot of time. So that'll probably be the focus here, at least into early November. But then after that, yeah, we can do some watch-alongs and have fun with that. I think people really enjoyed those. I certainly did with the one we just did at Richmond just last week. Kind of brought back some interesting memories. Haven't watched that one in quite a while. But yeah, 97 Atlanta was the one there on that. Alrighty. Yeah, Atlanta Fall 97 watch long is very possible. They could do the spring one too. Maybe we'll pair them up. That'll be something to look at. Let's see here. We'll just do a couple more here, and then we'll probably call it a night here. Still got to get the article going here and so forth. Alrighty, next question. What track hosted Jeff Burton's 1993 NASCAR Winston Cup debut? What track hosted Jeff Burton's 1993 NASCAR Winston Cup debut? Don't look it up. Try to guess it here. What track hosted Jeff Burton's 1993 NASCAR Winston Cup debut? Talk about Cup debuts. How about a double feature? If people are up to it, we might do something. If we do a real long stream there. I don't monetize those the streams. I mean, I don't want to. I certainly don't want to upset people over at the NASCAR Classics page because they've been really cool and especially after the issues we had with the copyright issues last year. I certainly don't want to poke the bear on that one. But again, if people want to tune in for those, we can just do them just for fun. We'll see. Alrighty, what track hosted Jeff Burton's 1993 NASCAR Winston Cup debut? We got guesses for Dover, Rockingham, New Hampshire, Phoenix. Alrighty, here we go. What track hosted Jeff Burton's 1993 NASCAR Winston Cup debut? The answer is Loudon, New Hampshire. Loudon, New Hampshire is correct. A few of you got that one. Theater Racer 85. Looks like you were the first one on that. There you go. Yeah, glad you like the watch alongs. I enjoy them too. That was fun. And you can always kind of see the race with fresh eyes, or maybe you kind of focus on another detail that doesn't get brought up. So yeah, that's pretty cool to see. But yeah, plenty of time on that. We'll I think over the off season that'll be really more of a time for that. But that'll be fun. That'll be fun. I got a lot of things I'm working on. Another thing I'm working on, the other thing I'm excited to do, I want to revamp my second channel here on YouTube. And before, it just had some of the, when I was kind of transitioning between the disqualification show and these live streams. I did some of your longtime viewers may remember this back in 2020, 2021. I was going to start a separate channel just for that because I wasn't really happy with like how the stream went during the Daytona thing following the Ryan Newman deal. So I wasn't sure, like, okay, do I need to change the view of this or not? Ultimately, this stream is pretty much about the same as that show was, the disqualification show was back in the day. So it's not too different. But I'd like to do something with that second channel. So stay tuned on that. Because I have some thoughts on that too. I think you hear my dog out in the door there. Okay. And let's see here. Yeah, definitely. Yep. Oh, yep. The dog's out there. All right. Hang on, Badger. Okay. I may have to attend to the dog here in just a moment. So we'll just do one more question here and we'll wrap it up here, folks. What raceway, last question of the evening, what raceway was nicknamed Strawberry Hill? I think we had this one before, but we'll try it again. What raceway was nicknamed Strawberry Hill? Yeah, I had a second channel. I think I have a third channel too. I had a second channel I did for streams briefly. It was like early 2021. It was like through COVID, basically. It was something I was just kind of experimenting with. And then I didn't do it for anything else. And I have another channel back in 2011. I made a second channel where it just had the memes that I made out of the starting grid videos. So you can just find those. It's like BSGN skits. That's out there too. I may kind of swing that together. The BSGN skits one, I think I created a whole different account for that one instead of just making it a separate channel on this. Cause I guess back then you could do it a different way. But I want to do something different with it here anyway. So I'm going to maybe do something with that. But yeah, most of the content here is still going to be on the primary channel here. But I see a lot of people do second channels, and that might be something kind of further down the line. That'll probably be in our project over the off season, I anticipate. What raceway was nicknamed Strawberry Hill? We got guesses for Wilkesboro, Sears Point, Richmond, World Speedway, assuming Texas World Speedway. Yeah, NASCAR racetrack, yeah. It just says what raceway was nicknamed Strawberry Hill, and it says was, so it could be an inactive one even, if you're still looking for guesses on that. That was literally its first name. Oh, he made a show about this? Oh, really? Okay, I didn't know that. Dogs whimpering out there. Oh, my goodness. Hopefully he's doing nothing unspeakable on the other side of that door. Well, we will find out soon enough. Okay. What raceway was nicknamed Strawberry Hill is the question. The answer is Richmond. Richmond is the answer. Richmond is there. So how about that? That's pretty timely. It was indeed Richmond. So 611 Hornet, you got it right away there, right along with Ultimate 23 Dragon and so forth. All righty. Let me check here. Let me see if we can bring our guest at the door in here in just a moment. I'm going to go to the loading screen for just a moment, and I will be right back. Oh, look who we got here. Hello. There's the Badger. There you are. So you're going to make noise at the door. I'm going to have to bring you on the show. Okay. Here's Badger. This is our little bundle of joy here. So we'll bring him on here just for the end here. So that will about do it for the show. I got to take this little guy outside here. So thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. Congratulations to our race winner, Austin Dillon, pending, of course, the results of post-race inspection. We'll find out if we get some more information on that soon enough. But it's going to be quite the story either way with the news this week. Oh, here we go. Oh, he's got something to say almost. Oh, no, he's just all curled up. Okay. Alrighty. Well, we are going to wrap up for tonight. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. The website is lastcar.info. The Patreon is patreon.com/lastcaronbrock. Did I say the Twitter is at lastcaronbrock? If I didn't, there it is again. So that'll be it for tonight. The article will be up later tonight. Our next show is going to be next Sunday after the Cup Series race in Michigan. We'll talk about the return of the Xfinity Series after a 1 month break. They get to kick off the weekend next Saturday, and then the Cup Series race, the Firekeepers Casino 400 on Sunday. And then after that show, we'll finally have a early afternoon show there instead of something burning the midnight oil here. So thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. We had a great show here tonight. Definitely had no shortage of stuff to talk about here, and I think it'll be a very interesting week here going forward as well. So I'll see you all next Sunday. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in.